Yeah, at this point, well, let's have a look at what Winston Churchill thought about Dum Dum bullets. Now, he said the power of the new Lee Metford rifle with the new Dum Dum bullet, it is now called, though not officially the Hindustani for at once bullet, is tremendous. The soldiers who have used it have the utmost confidence in their weapon. Up to 500 yards, there is no difficulty about judging the range, as it shoots quite straight, or technically speaking, has a flat trajectory. This is of the greatest value. Of the bullet, it may be said that its stopping power is all that could be desired. The Dum Dum bullet, though not explosive, is expensive. The original Lee Metford bullet was a pellet of lead covered by a nickel case, with an opening at the base. In the improved bullet, this outer case has been drawn backward, making the hole in the base a little smaller and leaving the lead at the tip exposed. The result is a wonderful, and from the technical point of view, a beautiful machine. On striking a bone, this causes the bullet to set up or spread out, and then it tears and splinters everything before it, causing wounds which in the body must be generally mortal, and in any of them necessitate amputation. Continental critics have asked whether such a bullet is not a violation of the Geneva or St. Petersburg Conventions, but no clause of these international agreements forbids expansive bullets, and the only provision on the subject is that shells less than a certain size shall not be employed. I would observe that bullets are primarily intended to kill, and that these bullets do their duty most effectively without causing any more pain to those struck by them than the ordinary lead variety. Well, no, of course not. They both kill you. Doesn't hurt at all. As the enemy can obtain some Lee Metford rifles and Dum Dum ammunition during the progress of the fighting, information on this latter point is forthcoming. The sensation is described as similar to that produced by any bullet, a violent numbing blow followed by a sense of injury and weakness, but little actual pain at the time. Lucky. Indeed, nowadays, very few people are so unfortunate as to suffer from much pain from wounds, except during the period of recovery. A man is hit in a quarter of an hour, that is to say, before the shock is passed away and the pain begins. He is usually at the dressing station. Here he is given morphine injections, which reduce all sensations to uniform dullness. In this state he remains until he is placed under chloroform and operated on. Right. So clearly he had no problem. In fact, he had no difficulty with the British Army using expansive bullets in their wars with the rebels in Pakistan. Sure, he even actually argues for their use. You see, the allegations that the Afrikaners, variously known as the Boers or the Burghers, during the Boer War of 1899, on or about that year, one of the reasons that the concentration camps and the genocide against the Boers, it was justified by the accusation that the Boers were systematically committing war crimes. Now, in other places, the journalist Winston Churchill justifies the use of what he calls Dum Dum bullets. But let's read about what he says. The trench was cut deep in the ground, and unlike our trenches, there was scarcely any parapet. A few great stones had been laid in front, but evidently the Boer believed in getting well into the ground. The bottom was knee-deep in cartridge cases, and every few yards there was an enormous heap of Mauser ammunition, thousands of rounds, all fastened neatly, 5 at a time, in clips. A large proportion were covered with bright green slime, which the soldiers declared was poison, on which analysis may prove to be wax used to preserve the bullet. The Boers, however, were not guiltless of other charges. A field officer of the East Surreys, recognizing me, came up and showed me an expansive bullet of a particularly cruel pattern. The tip had been cut off, exposing the soft core, and 4 slits were scored down the sight. Whole boxes of this ammunition had been found, he claimed. An officer who had been making calculations told me that the proportion of illegal bullets was nearly 1 in 5. Nearly 1 in 5. I should not myself have thought it was so large, but certainly the improper bullets were very numerous. Is that true? I have a specimen of this particular kind by me as I write, and I am informed by people who shoot big game that it is the most severe bullet of its kind yet invented. 5 other sorts have been collected by the medical officers, who have also tried to classify the wounds they respectively produce. Important sentence. What was he looking at, the bullets or the wounds? I cannot be accused of having written unfairly about the enemy. Indeed, I have only cared to write what I thought was the truth about everybody. I have tried to do justice to the patriotic virtues of the Boers, and now it is necessary to observe that the character of these people reveals in stress a dark and spiteful underside. A man, I use the word in its fullest sense, does not wish to lacerate his foe, however earnestly he may desire his life. Now, few words to be said. In other writings, Churchill had no problem with the British Army using Dum Dum bullets against rebels in Africa and India. In fact, he justified their use. Well, by the way, I'm not sure this whole passage isn't. I'm not sure it isn't a big lie. In fact, there's no actually, in the absence of any actual evidence of the Boers manufacturing Dum Dum bullets, which it's hard to know why they would. The fact is, this lie, which is actually later on used to justify the genocide of 50,000 to 100,000 women and children. I mean, the old stink that the Boers were using Dum Dum bullets hangs around, but I would like to observe with me. I'd like you to observe with me some old photos of the Boers, and they did in fact have Mauser and Mannlicher rifles, which were modern rifles firing gun cotton, which fired jacketed bullets, which could be, in theory, converted into Dum Dum bullets by clipping off the end with a pair of pliers and exposing the soft core. But Churchill's arguments seems to be a fairly sleek argument. Well, there's allegations of the use of illegal bullets, and there's also the wounds. Now, that seems harder to argue, and it seems an open and shut case that the Boers were using Dum Dum bullets because the bodies of the British soldiers had gaping wounds in them. But, I mean, we ought to actually have a close look at some of the photos of the Afrikaner soldiers engaged in the war. And a few things to notice, that they very often armed with this rifle. Which is some? Oh no, sorry, that's not one. They were very often armed with bolt action. For that day, modern bolt action rifles firing copper jacketed bullets. But many soldiers of the war, in fact, if you notice, were equipped with, here's a native contingent fighting for the British, armed with this rifle here. The 1871 pattern Martini Henry rifle, which was the stock standard weapon of the British Army in those decades before the introduction of the Lee Metford. Now it's noticed that a 30-year-old rifle is being used to equip native contingents, which was standard British practice. And notice the Martini Henry is an old black powder rifle firing lead bullets, and you use lead bullets because you don't need a copper jacket, because they hadn't invented gun cotton. So you cannot make a Dum Dum bullet from a lead bullet, a factory standard lead bullet. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no copper jacket to modify. So the thing is, as it is out of the factory, a Dum Dum bullet, by virtue of just being a lump of lead. Now, many of the Boers, you notice, were armed with old Martini Henrys they'd got their hands on in the possibly in the war, the First Boer War, or they'd bought up second hand, or got their hand begged, borrowed, or got their hands on somehow. But they were all farmers, and they were using them for hunting game, and so it was quite good for that. So it's no surprise to find quite a good proportion of the Afrikaners armed with British Army rifles. And here's a pretty good example. The black powder falling block single shot Martini Henry rifle, which you can see fired a gigantic bullet made of lead. And this was the rifle that the British Army used in the Zulu Wars. And this was the Martini Henry rifle that was used regularly in the Afghan wars, in the wars in the Sudan, all over the globe, and it was used to shoot rebellious tribes. It was not at all a nice weapon to get hit by. And you see large numbers of the Boers are armed with these weapons. This guy possibly has one. It's hard to see behind the shadow, but you can tell by the shape of the bandolier about what sort of ammo they're carrying, which dictates what sort of. But here we go. This guy's got a. This guy's got one, and here we go. He's got his Martini Henry. I mean, the Boers weren't rich people. They weren't. They were an irregular force made up of citizen farmers who had whatever rifle they had hanging over the fireplace, and to accuse them of wasting their time and modifying bullets for no good reason, you see, and this is the thing that gets unmentioned by Mr. Churchill, that if a substantial proportion of the Afrikaner soldiers were armed with these army surplus British rifles and what seems like to all the world like stock standard ammunition, they would have punctured large holes in the British soldiers, unlucky enough to get in the way. Now, these monstrous wounds, which were pretty typical for Zulus and the other enemies of the British Empire, interpreting them as a result of a deliberately modified copper-jacketed bullet is well, is that entirely honest? The Afrikaners were using British rifles and British ammunition to shoot British soldiers, exactly the same guns that the British habitually were using to shoot everyone else. Now, apart from your political views, claiming that that's a war crime is well, I'll leave it to the viewer's own judgment to judge whether someone acting such a way is in fact unfair or unjust. With this stuff in mind about the false accusations made against the Afrikaners, let's remind ourselves of the Book of Revelation, where St. John records, "Then there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come, I will show thee the damnation of the great whore, that sitteth upon many waters, with whom have committed fornication. The kings of the earth and the inhabitants of the earth are drunken with the wine of her fornication." Now, this fornication in the Bible is a symbol for idol worship, or the worship of devils. And so continues, "So he carried me away into the wilderness in the spirit, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, which had 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and gilded with gold and precious stones and pearls, and had a cup of gold in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And in her forehead was a name written, a mystery, Great Babylon, the mother of whoredoms and abominations of the earth." And this is what it's saying, is that the Church of Rome is the source of all idolatries and heretical religions and syncretized religions and Christian religions jumbled up with paganism, like rabbinical Judaism, like Islam, like Catholicism. Mystery, Great Babylon, the mother of whoredoms and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great marvel. And the angels said to me, Wherefore marvellest thou? I will show thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that beareth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou hast not seen was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and shall go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Now, Here is the mind that hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, whereon the 7 woman sitteth. There are also 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and one is, and another is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not is even the 8th, is even the 8th, and is one of the 7, and shall go into the destruction. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which yet have not received a kingdom, but shall receive power, as kings at 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and authority unto the beast. These shall fight with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is King, Lord of lords, and King of kings. And they that are on his side are called and chosen and faithful. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are people, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast are they that shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his word, and to do with one consent, for to give her their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is the great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So, yeah, I mean, the internet's full of conspiracy theorists talking about how the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican, through the Jesuits, using Freemasonry, controls every government in the world. And as they say, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. But yeah, you even see the great Winston Churchill persecuting Boer farmers to death, and manufacturing slanders and lies, and doing what he did his whole life, was to consign millions of people to a horrible death.